You are watching AmericaPreachers.com. Be blessed, because I got a feeling you're going to keep growing because of this.
Today, I have the honor of interviewing the 11th Dean of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. STVU, as it's commonly called, is the Graduate Theological School of Virginia Union University. Formally established in 1941 as the School of Religion, STVU's origins extend back to the founding of the university as the Richmond Theological Institute in 1865. STVU is named after the late Samuel DeWitt Proctor, alumnus and former president of Virginia Union University, also a distinguished pastor, scholar, educator, and civic leader. Grounded in the rich traditions of African and African American religious life and culture, STVU emphasizes inclusive intellectual excellence, transformative spiritual growth, and faithful service to the church and the world. Since its establishment, 10 individuals have served STVU as Dean: Richard McKinney, Samuel Carter, Samuel DeWitt Proctor, Alex B. James, Miles Jones, J. Deotis Roberts, Paul Nichols, Henry Mitchell, John W. Kinney, Corey D.B. Walker, and now the 11th Dean of STVU, Bishop John Guns. I sat down on campus for an in-depth conversation about his new role as Dean, expected changes at STVU, and the state of preaching and the church. I hope you enjoy. So, Dr. Guns, Dean Guns.
I'm still getting used to that.
Let me start off with asking, why Union?
It's home. I am a two-time graduate of the School of Theology, and I feel an inseparable kinship to not only the success of the school, but I feel an inseparable kinship to the community that is this school. I feel like this is where God has ordained for my last years of formal ministry to be lived out. So even as I am serving the St. Paul Church, I feel an incredible embrace to walk out the assignment here as Dean of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology.
That's awesome. Now, we are in the month of July 2021. And many will say that we've came out of the pandemic. Some will say we're kind of still in it because only half of Americans are vaccinated. When we look at the changes or the dynamic of where the church was, with the School of Theology involving like the curriculum, what things may be added or maybe have thought of that to be included or have already with the curriculum to cater what we kind of just came out of and where we're going?
Well, I think first of all, you talk about curriculum development, it's a really integral process. I think the most important thing that the School of Theology will offer is sensitivity to the shifts that have occurred. Technology is a major one, but also the mental health of spiritual leaders, and how that affects our ability to imagine and reimagine, to reinvent, and even to reposition ourselves. I think ultimately what the seminary is going to offer moving forward is a little more targeted curriculum in impacting and empowering not just the local pastor, but preachers as a whole, to look for creative and dynamic ways by which they can live out call. Not everyone is called to pastor a church. And so there needs to be exposure in the academy to various opportunities by which one can live out purpose and fulfill the kingdom of God and the mandate that's on their life.
Thank you. When we look at the online approach, no union, came out 2014, always have been in the in-class atmosphere. Moving forward with the School of Theology, will they welcome an online approach for students?
Absolutely. In fact, our virtual or online campus is going to be robust, is going to be effective, and it's going to partner with the need of the student that says, I can't physically relocate to Richmond, but I want to be shaped within the School of Theology and all of the traditions and all of the incredible minds that serve there. And so definitely that is where we are, and that is where we're going.
Wonderful. You know, we talked about the school. We'll look at the church, being that what we have just kind of come out of. What shift do you think the church should embrace at this time?
I mean, everybody's talking about virtual or the hybrid model. However, I think that the church needs to embrace an openness to creative ministry models and paradigms. I think that the church needs to look at, every local church needs to look at how they're doing what they're doing to disciple. Because ultimately, discipleship is still the mandate of Jesus Christ. I don't care how much culture changes, our mission should never change. And so I think we need to look for creative ways to live out that mission of discipleship. So for us at St. Paul, we're focusing on the creation of connection groups built around people's interests. And the goal is, if you enjoy walking, then we'll create a space for you to walk with other disciples. And we will use that space to ensure that you are not only discipled, but you find community. Because ultimately, if a person finds community, then they will find desire. And then, when they are struggling with desire, there will be persons in place that will light the fire to keep them focused on what they need to be achieving. And so I think the biggest shift is on how we live out koinonia, how we live out community, and looking for creative ways to do that, so every person connected will experience the kind of space where their discipleship is the priority.
Awesome. Now, thank you. When we look at preaching, and you are a preacher par excellence. I want to keep the question vague so you can answer however you want to. What do you believe now is the state of preaching?
Preaching was exposed both positively and negatively during the pandemic. I believe that far too much of our preaching focused on instigating and inducing response from people. When it was us and a camera person and a couple of singers, and there was no congregating, many of us had to rethink how we approached the craft, but how much of the craft was the investment of exegeting the pew and not appropriately managing the text. I think now we've been all called back to a place of accountability as to what to do with the text, because content, at least in 2020 and the first half of 2021, has been king and queen. And so I think that the state of preaching is that it's being reassessed. I think that preaching and those who teach preaching are looking for innovative ways to maintain the effectiveness of the craft while trying to look for healthy ways by which we speak to the congregant who now has gotten preaching indigestion. Because in the pandemic, people surfed, and they surfed the web looking for whatever voice would speak to their particularity. And so now I think the other piece is our preaching must draw people back to, if not a singular voice, the voice of your pastor, but it must draw people back to a place of accountability. And that's why I believe that we must work diligently at the craft so that we will give those who listen to us what they need so that they can manage life as they move forward.
That was so powerful because as you started off saying the pandemic, the services, how it exposed so much. And you're dean of School of Theology. Now we talked about preaching. Now, share with this, because some who never attended seminary, will seminary help their preaching?
Absolutely.
And how so?
One, I think because it exposes you to those who take preaching seriously. I think the other thing is that it will put you among those who are pursuing this in a processive manner. I believe that every preacher needs to have not only preaching models, but every preacher needs to be in a community of preachers whereby you can wrestle with your unique process of crafting a sermon from a text and from a concept, and where you can begin to understand the various components that are necessary for your success as a preacher.
Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase of the two words of mental health, of the awareness. Now, concerning mental health, I remember when I was a student, there was various assessments that we would take for the course completion, that we would be screened. Are there any plans at Union to increase the focus of mental health within the graduate curriculum?
Absolutely. Not just the pandemic, but I think the stress of ministry in a changing secularized culture demands that the preacher engages in not only mental health assessments, but conversations, and for some, therapy and counseling. The demand of ministry is such, and the stress of ministry is such, until many of us in ministry are unhealthy, because we are driven by this desire to be successful, right? But then we're driven by this desire while having to depend on God for that success, while interacting with people who sometimes are not inspired and motivated at the level we are. And then you couple that with the fact that at any moment, those who you have nurtured can come to you and say, hey, favorite words of people in church, my season is up. Many of us don't know who we're going back to, right? Who will return. So there is an uncomfortable trauma associated with all of the dynamics and factors. I believe that we must not only create circles where we help each other, but also circles where where professionals help us navigate our internal challenges and our external professional challenges. And then in many ways, brought into a place of healing through our prayer life, our time of solitude, and through our interaction within the wider community.
Thank you. I know you have preaching in your blood. Who are, when you look at influences who have helped you, and can you share with us in preaching?
Man, you don't have enough time.
Okay.
I start with my father and my brother.
Okay.
Dr. Frank Guns, Dr. Jeffrey Guns.
Okay.
My dad has taught me the integrity of life, which I think is a part of preaching. Because if you are a gifted preacher but you lack integrity and character, then your preaching will eventually bring you into scandal, which will then minimize your voice. My brother, because he's taught me the importance of preparation and sermon development and the crafting of introductions. Over the years, persons like Bishop Walt Scott Thomas, who early on influenced me and caused me to want to rethink how I understood preaching. Here, Dr. Miles Jones, Dr. Henry Mitchell, my contemporaries, Dr. Jerry Carter, Dr. William Curtis, Dr. Clay, Bishop Derek Triplett, Bishop Rudy McKissick, Dr. Gina Stewart. I can just go on and on. I think ultimately, for me, my preaching influences are really persons who in seasons spoke to me and in turn influenced how I understood the preaching craft. I think ultimately the two influences that I point to that have been enduring is Howard Thurman and Henry Nouwen. Howard Thurman pushed me to want to think bigger and wider. Henry Nouwen influenced me to want to clean up my inner life and to be faithful to being the man that God has created. And so those two have been there. And then I think finally my mother, who's going to be with the Lord, who just constantly reminded me that this is God's assignment. And you must always remember it's about Him and not about you.
Thank you. Other than the Bible, is there a book that you remember that has been very influential in ministry?
For me, The Wounded Healer, okay, by Henry Nouwen, Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. Okay. I mean, it's a ton of books, but I think ultimately those two have kind of helped shape me. I'm a closet mystic. And so between Howard Thurman and Henry Nouwen, I've kind of been shaped in mysticism. And I love that. I love that world, that orbit, because it allows me to live out what is my own personal theological school of thought of choice, process theology. So in many ways, I think those two books, along with others, have been very powerful in shaping the way I understand. And the book, The Humanity of God by Karl Barth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Thank you. With preachers or individuals that's looking to further the study, can you share with us maybe why they should come to Union?
You ought to come to Union. I'm looking right at the camera. 3 reasons. First reason is the tradition of Union will expose you to the vast array of voices and experiences that have shaped and is shaping theological thought in today's context. Secondly, you ought to come to Union because it is a community of learners that will give you the balance of your personal experience and your professional experience, and will allow you to engage and to connect to people who will be impactful for you. But here's the last reason: because it's God's will. Because ultimately, you got to want to be better, and that's the point of going to seminary. You got to want to be better. You got to want to grow. You got to want to be stretched. And I love this place because it is designed to frustrate you into maturity and to grow you into accountability. And if you open your heart and your mind, you will discover that Virginia Union School of Theology, the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology, is good for you because it makes you better at every level of your life.
Going back to the, if you call it pandemic preaching or virtual preaching, can you share with us maybe some good trends that you may have seen, and then some things that that definitely as preachers we need to be working on?
I think good trends was that it kind of it cut the fat off preaching.
Okay.
And a lot of the entertainment value that we employ in preaching, especially in the black church. And so I think at one level, it cut the fat. And it caused us to streamline thought, to be more targeted. And to be honest, for like me, it cut my sermons by 10 minutes. I'm finding the 10 minutes again now that we're in person. But I think that some of the best practices that we've discovered in this is focus on ensuring that the message is not driven for us as an affirming moment of gift, but it is driven as a means by which men and women, boys and girls, come to know Jesus Christ. And our content is strategically shaped to accomplish that goal. And I think that ultimately for me, that's been what's key. I've never been an entertainment guy anyway, but I understand that you can pick up habits in the sanctuary that kind of moves people where you want them to go. Well, in pandemic preaching, you can't move them where you want it to go. And so the Spirit has to guide you beyond you to meet them where they need to be.
Thank you. So, Dr. Guns, let me ask you, what inspires you to work at preaching?
First of all, my love for God.
Okay.
Second of all, God has a sense of humor because he called the stutterer to be a preacher. And when people hear that, they think that I'm being, some can think I'm being irreverent, but I'm not. I literally know that God chooses men and women to do this work who are sometimes not chosen by anybody else. But here's the other thing that inspires me. I get a chance to touch people's lives in a very real way. I get a chance to impact the lives of others. And that inspires me, because when you get a chance to touch the lives of other people, then you find life as having meaning every day. And so those who preach, my encouragement to you is take advantage of the incredible opportunity God has granted you to be a person who works at the transformation of others and who God uses to participate in the changing of others' lives. What a joy, what a privilege it is for another flawed human being to participate in the life of flawed human beings on behalf of a flawless God who accomplishes his will through us. Man, that inspires me.
That's powerful. Dr. Guns, I end all broadcasts with a word of encouragement. And I usually have the individual, they look in the camera and they just share just a word of encouragement. If you was to share a word for a preacher or a pastor in ministry, maybe these last 16 months have been hard for them. The investment has been hard, and trying to work, trying to get the membership back right, trying to work things out with leaders. Just a word of encouragement. I know I mentioned several different things. What would be on your heart to share?
When I accepted my call to preach and I was preparing to preach my initial sermon, my mom said to me, "The burden of proof is not on you, it's on the Lord." And for the last 35, 36 years of my ministry life, that's what's driven me. The burden of proof is not on me, it's on the Lord. My encouragement is to trust the God who called you. Stay true to that. Walk through these processes, not with the negative or victimized mentality or behavior or even perception, but walk through them excited about the fact that you get a chance to live out purpose and to serve the people of God. I sit in this chair not as being more qualified than anybody, but being chosen by him. So the burden of proof is not on me. Burden of proof is on the Lord. And He is faithful to fulfill His purpose if you trust Him.
It's perfect. Dr. Gunn, thank you.
Thank you, man.
My brother, mentor.